Good morning, everybody. My name is Géraldine Gauvin. I'm in charge of the reduction department. We're here to talk about single-use packaging. We all thought in front of shelves that there were far too much packaging. We want to go beyond what the consumer feels and see what is at stake when we say that we need to reduce packaging, because reduction, just as recyclability, is a technical dimension and means industrial modification. And just as reuse, it require a change from the consumers. Today, we are not going to talk about the reuse, which is a major lever to reduce packaging or single-use packaging. Today, we're going to focus on reduction. So we looked at your expectations before this morning. When you registered, you could send us questions. There were a lot of questions. We're not going to be able to look at everything. We're not going to talk about recycling or the integration of recycled materials. We're going to talk about the reduction levers that we mentioned last year during the first edition of the Reduce Day. We're going to talk about optimization, the optimization of the empty space for online sales. We're going to talk about the regrouping of special offers. We're going to talk about the simplification of packaging, how we can have more simple single-use packaging. We're also going to talk about the packaging for solid product or concentrated product, and how we can reduce the packaging that comes with it. Before we start, I'd like to tell you that the mics are off. All the speakers are remote, but you can take part in this event by asking questions on the chat. Sehen, Valentine, and Anaïs will answer during the event on the chat. We also take a few questions live on the plateau, on the stage. So we're going to start with Jean Ornin, who is the General Director of CITEO Reduce. Then I will tell you about our roadmap for 2030. Then Florence Veil will tell us about the study regarding useless packaging. Then we'll have the winners of the Call for project for CITEO Reduce. Then a short break and a session on the alternative solutions for single-use packaging. And then we'll end this morning with a session on the sectorial working groups. We told you about these working groups last time regarding our desire to work collectively on reduced packaging. To start with, we're going to welcome Jean Ornin, the General Director of CITEO Reduce, who's going to tell us about reduction. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Géraldine. This is the reduction day number 2. I think there are more than 500 people online for this day, which is very timely because next week is the European Week for Reducing Our Waste. We all need to reduce our waste so that we can optimize the reduction. And reduction is the first of the 3 R's, reducing, reuse, recycle. Household packaging over the last 2 or 3 years have dropped actually in terms of tonnage for all the materials, with one exception, cardboard, because the development of our consumption mode means that there was this development, but we have increased the use of cardboard. So regarding the subject of reduction, Géraldine mentioned it. It's not a trivial subject. It's very complex. It's very interesting. And there are a lot of industrial stakes, competition stakes. in order to have the right packaging, the one that is strictly necessary for the consumption, with different development that we're going to see during the day. Our work is to be there for you, to be there for the different companies regarding the reduction. And in 2025, we actually assisted 4 winners of our call for projects. They're going to show us what they are doing and what we want to do. And this is really what is at stake there. We want to help different companies and also different industrial sectors. We want to completely change and have reduction solutions. We started this operation in 2025 with the online sales, with the shipment packaging. And by 2026, we'll have about 6 business sectors so that we can switch some industries to adopt reduction tactics. This day is going to be very interesting. We're going to discover the different investigation and surveys, and we're going to have the testimony of different companies that will show you what they are doing at the moment. This very tangible aspect will cast some light on the fact that it is possible. We can indeed reduce the packaging, but at the same time, it raises questions, investment questions, questions regarding the relationship we can have with the consumers. All these questions are being asked in order to make progress on the pathway of reduction. You can count on CITEO. We are the facilitator of a whole ecosystem in order to obtain results and have the right solutions on the pathway of the 3 R's: recycle, reuse, reduce. So we are there to share with you on all the different headways we are achieving. So I wish you well, and I hope I'll see you soon. Thank you, Jean. As we've seen, when consumption drops, and that was the case over the last few years, well, the stock of packaging tends to decrease as well. And we are working on the fact that regardless of the growth, we need to reduce our packaging. How do we do? Well, by 2030, we have the objective to have no more useless packaging. That's the objective we are setting. How can we do that? Well, we need to decrease our tonnage. We need to decrease heavy packaging in order to reach our ambitious industrial objectives. We know that there is another objective also. Reduction is often associated with the optimization of packaging. We try to go further than that with our 5 levers. So we need to look at symbolical packaging. For example, the tier croc, the puller that we documented last year. It might be symbolical, but it shows that we can act differently and we can use the single-use packaging differently. So as consumers, we can do differently. We can also go back to essential concepts.
Donc, comment on va faire?
How are we going to do this? We have our calls for projects. Jean mentioned that, and the winners are going to share their works with us. We also want to launch sectorial working groups. We said that last time. Two of them have been launched. We want to launch 6 of them by the end of next year. So we want to move forward. We know that all these subjects are extremely complex and we need to work hand in hand in order to come up with solutions and change the marketing codes. We have new subjects and we need to share the knowledge regarding this subject, knowing the different industrial sectors. We need also to look at the alternative solutions for single-use plastic. It's also what we have regarding the different levers, for example, flexible formats or lighter materials. We also need to look at the consumers with the alerts coming from the consumers. The consumers might be able to actually mention the packaging that they deem useless. Once we have this knowledge, how we can share with industrialists to decrease the packaging. Then, once we have documented all these works, how can we make sure that we keep working on eco-modulation projects? For the very first time, we have set up incentive eco-modulation. The more reduce the packaging, the more the marketing during the first year. There's an additional reduction, additional bonus, which is comparable to the reduction of the packaging. If you have reduced your packaging by 60%, you will have a 70% bonus on your contribution. We want to have very incentive measures. We know that it's not easy to implement, but there are financial incentives with this bonus. So this is our roadmap. I was talking about our different studies, including the useless packaging study. We're going to welcome Florence Veil, who is the project leader for the reduction project. She's going to tell us about the study regarding useless packaging. Good morning, Florence. Before I start, before you tell us what is a useless packaging, could you remind us of the general background for this study? Yes. To start with, this study is answer to our specifications that ask us to mention and to explain what is the useless dimension. It's also an answer to other decrease the 3R, decrease the AJEC law, which requires a decrease of the single-use plastic packaging. Also, the PPWR regulation that recommends to have optimized packaging on the market in the light of their functionality, their components, and the quantity of materials. This study is carried out complying with this national decrease, national regulations, and European regulations. So it's not only about plastic, it's all types of materials. And this work is a way to come up with something that is acceptable for the marketers, and something that is harmonized in the light of regulations. If we look at the 3R decrease, we are being asked, or in the text it is said that beyond the transport, the product protection, or the consumer protection, all the things that are not related to that, well, all the packaging are useless. We want to have an additional approach to this decree. It's a multi-material approach in order to have a ranking of packaging from useless to useful. The packagings that will be deemed useless will be listed and submitted to the validation of a multi-stakeholder committee that will validate or not the belonging to this list, which lead to a harmonization of the recommendations, of the ambitions and regulatory objectives. Once we've said that, what is the definition of a useless packaging? Well, for us, it's packaging that complies with at least one of the 4 criteria. That's the information you should take away. So is the packaging in discrepancy with the market? Is it excessive? Or does it have a redundant functionality? Or is it misleading for the consumer? For example, if I take a can of tuna with a paper packaging, if I want to ask the question about this packaging, paper packaging, I have to ask myself, is it in discrepancy with the market? Well, yes, because, you know, it's an aluminum tin, so the paper is useless. So it's excessive. Does it have a redundant functionality? Yes, the product is protected twice. The paper does not protect anything. Is it misleading for the consumer? No, it doesn't make the consumer believe that the packaging is, the product is bigger. So, if I go to a supermarket, I can compare in the savory groceries whether or not, or how the tuna tin is packaged with other brands, and over samples of about 10 products, if my packaging, my tuna tin, is the only one to be with paper, well, it will be a discrepancy with the market. So that's one of the criteria, 10% criteria that we have set up. Of course, it is a threshold, that is a starting point. It might change in the future with the developments on the market. So, in a nutshell, useless packaging is not only about what the consumer feels. There are different criteria. So useless packaging or candidate for the uselessness, well, there will be packaging that either will have been misleading or excessive or redundant or with a discrepancy with the market. How can you concretely identify this packaging? Well, we've come up with a decision process. When you have a packaging unit that we want to quantify, we actually ask ourselves, does it meet with one of the 4 criteria that we mentioned just before? If my packaging or my packaging component meets with one of the criteria, we are going to believe that the packaging is useless. If it's meeting one or several criteria, in that case, we have to ask ourselves, this packaging, is it justified by an industrial need, a consumer need, or a precise functionality? If the answer is no, well, it's going to be added to the packaging that are candidates for the usefulness, uselessness. and then it will go in front of a committee that will decide whether or not it is useless. If there is a functionality that is useful for this packaging, well, this packaging will belong to the category to be questioned. So there's a whole ranking from useless to useful, but we'll look at this later on. You had an example, I believe.
Voilà, le package. A chips package with the empty space inside. You know, you have potato chips and empty space, and it feels like you're getting ripped off by this useless empty space. But when you look into it, actually you need air to protect potato chips against being crushed, and it's meant to avoid you end up just with crumbs. So it's actually useful. It's not useless. So you understand from this example that it's not that easy to define what is useful versus useless. So this is why we started testing some 400 SEE alerts. This is consumers who report packages they deem to be excessive, such as with excess empty space. So these 400 packages that were reported, we put through this test, and we were able to come up with 3 categories, and we'll discuss this further in a moment. So we saw the potato chips package, which may look like bad practice, but when you look into it further, you realize that there's actually a need on the manufacturer's side. And thanks to your method and all the consumer reports, you were able to identify some useless packages? Of course. Yes. So we have some 40 items that may be considered to be useless. So they're potentially useless, and they're under review. Here you see a few examples of items in packaging. You see in the 2 pictures at the top, this is Scotch tape with a handle, and at the bottom you have batteries in 2 different packages, one with a small packaging, another one with a big packaging. So you can see we can discuss features, okay, for transportation at the top, and to put on the shelf and display to the consumer. So you have these. For the Scotch tape, the handle is useless, and the extra surface on the blister pack to sell the battery is useless. So we were able to identify non-essential features, and this list is work in progress. We'll add to it. But we can start with what we have. So protecting the packaging, adding an extra packaging, like with a tuna, making it more visible on the shelf, or making it seem more valuable because of extra empty space waiting, or an additional item, or a promotional aid. The good news is, once we have looked through all the different features on the market, actually very few products are concerned by this. So there isn't that much work to do. A few pain points remain, but it's not going to be a lot of work. And we have, on the other side, confirmed useful features: protecting the product, transporting the product, and providing regulatory information. And lastly, the largest category, the questionable features. We have the uses that consumers are used to, and then we have on the other side industrial constraints. I could give you an example. I should have given you an example of useful packaging. To show the difference between useful and questionable features, we can mention a pack of detergent powder. You will find empty space, empty headspace. It looks like you're getting ripped off, but you're not, because the product, when you fill it, tends to foam and then it settles and uses less space. So it can actually spill out and be wasted when being packaged, or you keep that measured headspace to be able to close the pack or the bottle properly for transportation. A questionable feature like the battery you saw in the blister pack, you have that surface which is the of the cardboard, which is much larger than the battery. I mean, you would have space for four batteries there. So it's not really useful. There's a hole to hang it. The product is protected, and you have all the information you need. So this is really questionable. And among these questionable features, this is what we need to work. We need to review them and decide whether they're questionable or should be moved to useful or useless, depending on the sector. And this is what we're working on for the years to come. Right. This is the questionable packaging that we can work on. This is packaging that we need to rethink single use. It's going to take some time, and all of these questionable packaging are going to be at the heart of our study. For the useful packaging, we're going to look at the three R decree: protection, integrity of the product, and regulatory information. That is the packaging, and it also ties into PPWR. The last category, useless packaging, these irritants, these pain points that were analyzed based on our four criteria to decide whether they are useless or not. So now, Florence, what do you think of these interleave sheets you find between slices of ham or cheese? Well, it was there. Is there a discrepancy with the market at the time? No. Redundant? No. Excessive? Yes. Deceptive? No. We have at least one yes in our four questions, so we can really question whether they're really useful. Is there customer feature? Yeah, it makes it easier for a consumer to grab the slice, so it's seen as better service. Still, does everyone need those? So it is questionable. It's an additional sheet of plastic. And thanks to us, at least us questioned their use and did away with them in their ham, and they found another solution to make the slices of ham easy to grab, and this way they avoided 60 tons of plastic. So you can find a solution and do away with these interleave sheets that can be put on the useless list and be presented to the annual committee meeting. You understand this method. It's adaptive. It changes with industrial advances and consumer preferences. So the threshold to decide whether it's potentially useless or not, and all of these features evolve in time, and the figures change year after year thanks to this annual revision committee that will keep ambitions in line and show the way. Yes, it's a long-term approach that will adapt with the way packages go as well. And now we can take questions, if any. I see one question. For deceptive packaging, such as a false bottom, is there a limit on empty space? No, but the size of the false bottom, yes. There have been suggestions. 50%, if I believe right, if I remember right. If it's 50% of the weight of the package is considered to be deceptive. Another question about the potato chips. If a package has an excessive empty space based on your method, it's still considered as useful? No, because we look at market practice. If it's excessive, it's excessive. If you're the only potato chip bag with a huge empty space, 50% of the space, and then you're not in line with market practice. So the size of the empty space depends on the actual need. So yes, we analyze the criteria and ratios, and there's also benchmarking to decide whether it's in the market average or not. That's it for the questions. And about the SEE reports, some consumers reported excessive empty space, and in 4% of cases it was useful. So it's not that easy to know what's useless and what's useful. And so this method is useful. Thank you, Florence. No other question. So let's now welcome the winners of our calls for proposals at CITEO and ADELPH. So, Jean de Tuder, Director of Marketing at De Vins et Domaines, Mathilde Grenier, in charge of CSR Global at UPSA, Constance Cornemillo, Senior Packaging Specialist at Nestlé, Director of the Supply Chain at Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us to share your experience with us. Jean, let's start with you. You work for De Vins et Domaines, an independent family-owned company. You're a winner of the call for proposal, which aimed to reduce the size of bottles. Tell us more. Good morning. I work for Delaunay. We're based in New Saint-Georges in Burgundy. We're experts in Burgundy wine and Languedoc wine. In 2022, the company decided to work on our CSR policy. It's called STEP, Society, Team Excellence, and Planet. And so we're working on reducing the use of glass for the environment. We decided to work on our best-known brand, Les Jamelles, to have the best and lightest bottle without compromising with aesthetics. And to be provocative, I would say we didn't want it to show at all. We didn't want to see the difference. We wanted the bottle to be as handsome as it was before while reducing the weight by 16%, quite significantly. So we worked on technical solutions, and you can see the results. For a full year, it's 176 tons of glass avoided, 60% of the weight of the bottle. And if you, and it's the equivalent of 28 flights between Paris and New York, both ways. Mathilde, you were in charge of CSR at UPSA. You won the last call for proposal on the 5 liters of reduction. Nothing to do with wine, of course. Tell us more about your project. Yes, good morning. Thank you. UPSA Lab is a French pharma lab. We just celebrated our 90th anniversary. We work in 6 therapy treatment areas. Our top one is fever and pain. You know, Defalgan and Efferalgan, I suppose. And our 2 factories are in France, and Lot and Garonne in Agen. And we just got a B Corp. We just got our B Corp certification. The project, we worked on our Defalgan with codeine formula. It's effervescent, and it's in a plastic tube in polypropylene with a cap with PE, and it has a desiccant inside to protect the formula from humidity. We started reworking the formula without touching the active ingredient. We looked at excipients that work with the active ingredients to make sure they're properly ingested and digested. We reduced the concentration of 8 raw materials and substituted 1 and saved 40% in the size of the medication. We were able to reduce the primary packaging thanks to the smaller tablets. And we were able to improve things further. Instead of just reducing the size of the tube to keep in line with the new size of the tablets, we also worked on the cap and the volume of desiccant. We also worked on the thickness of the tubes. You have 2 types. Yes, one we've already reduced, and one that is even further reduced because it's less thick. You can see the numbers here. You can see in the formula we reduced the size of the tablet by 41%, and depending on the solution we choose, we will save 40 to 60 tons of packaging waste per year. And if I study if I calculate the CO2 equivalent, it's 900 to 1,200 tons of CO2 per year. And I didn't look at Paris-New York flights, but the annual impact of 100 to 130 of French people's consumption. Constance, over to you. You work for Nestlé, and you are working on the films around cereal. Yes, thank you. Good morning. Nestlé Cereals is a leader in breakfast cereals with iconic brands like Chocapic and Nesquik. Every day in our factories and our suppliers, we are committed to reducing our impact on the environment. One of our objectives for packaging reduction is to reduce materials, especially single-use plastic. And this project I want to mention today is part of that. You know the mini mix, 6 small cereal packages held together by plastic film. Well, we are working on finding an alternative to the plastic film, and perhaps using dots of glue or a paper banner or stickers, or a combination of the above. Before talking about manufacturing of this solution, we would like to conduct studies with our consumers, a qualitative study with prototypes for consumers to test the new packaging solution, and then quantitative studies to check that on the shelf in the store our products remain visible and easy to handle. We would like to measure the environmental impact with a life cycle analysis to make sure there's no transfer of impact with a new solution. Great, thank you, and you'll tell us more.
Du coup,
Okay, to finish with this roundtable, we're going to have Philippe Moral, who is in charge of the supply chain for Heinz. So you have put an end to the cardboard box around the mayonnaise packaging. Thank you for your invitation. So I work for Kraft Time, more specifically for Benedicta, which is produced in France since 1907, and that's where we manufacture this mayonnaise packaging. Until last year, it was a package with an individual box, and our project is to get rid of this cardboard box. So we are at the implementation phase, so further than the study phase. We are hoping to save about 50 tons of packaging just by removing this cardboard box around the mayonnaise packaging. So on the paper, it seems simple. You know, you just have to remove the cardboard box, but it means a lot of changes in the production lines. And as a matter of fact, you took advantage of a more global modification in your manufacturing lines to include this specific project. Yes, this is part of a global approach to modernize our production cycles. We were talking about that just before. Removing a packaging, it seems to be very simple on the paper, but in our industry where we produce millions of units per year, you know, behind this removal, we have to completely rethink about our production line with very long cycles that require complete overhaul of our logistical chain. Concretely, what does it mean on your line, on your manufacturing line? It's also a matter of transport, packaging, shipment packaging. Now you do not have this box, so it's like a big matchbox box, which is very easy to package for shipments. If you remove that cardboard box, we have to completely redesign the transport cycle, because with the cardboard boxes, it was very stable. We do not have a preform plastic plastic pre-shape, so we had to test that the packaging we had designed was working properly for the shipment. So now the tube is going to be included in a ready for sale box in order for the products to be put on the shelves more easily. So it sounds simple, but it's actually more complicated than what it seems. Sometimes it can be expensive to develop this type of dynamics. Jean, for your reduced bottle, did you have any industrial obstacles? Well, there was a kind of the planets were kind of aligned. This project was rather complicated, and our industrialists actually have made a lot of progress. When we went to see them, the engineers were working on that, had been working on that for quite a long time. The most complicated thing was to allocate the quantity of glass in an even manner. There cannot be any weak point. So, and at the same time, we needed to keep an elegant shape for the bottle. So we were actually supported by Adolphe in this approach. It was actually a prototype that was very ambitious, but it went really well at the end of the day. But we needed to look at different subjects, the stabilities on the production lines. We needed to have very stable bottles, no breakage. But everything went very smoothly. If I look beyond the question of hindrances, when we talk about the clients in our sector, in our business sector, there is a belief that a heavy bottle is a quality bottle. Well, it is not really the case, and there are different studies that have been published that observe that it's not really the case, that you can have very static bottles, very light bottles that still represent or express a value. I would add a specificity to that in terms of looks. The external signs for the brand, such as the engraving, there are things that are extremely valued when they are consistent, valued by the consumer. This is why we decided to reduce the weight, but to keep very high quality visible signs. And I will end by an observations about the clients. Some wine markets are very much regulated, and they are very demanding. No, they are actually, these markets really want to have very light bottles, not more than 420 grams. So the fact that we have these very good-looking bottles with the right weights, it gives you a competitive edge. You don't have to use the same bottle as everybody else because, and we actually did our best with these hindrances, and we changed them into opportunities. And the consumers are quite satisfied, aren't they? Well, it's still an early stage to say. As I said, actually, the quality stays, the quality remains, and the clients that have been faced with these new bottles, well, if we had not told them about the changes, they would not have noticed. So it's quite positive. So for you, the consumer is really at the heart of your approach. It might be more visible than the bottle reduction. Could you tell us why the consumers are really essential in your project? Yes, the consumers need to buy into our project, because when we modify the packaging of our product, it means major changes in terms of usages and visibility. Usage, because we need to make sure that the packaging is as handy as before for the consumers. This is why we want to carry out a quality study with prototypes so that the consumer can handle the new packaging. And we have to make sure that there's no hindrance in the use of the product. And regarding the visibility on the shelves, we need to have a quantity study with digital shelves, just to make sure that the consumers sees the products on the shelves. And that is not a hindrance for the sales. It is really essential also to be aware that we have a lot of regulations regarding these plastic sheets. So we need to have to make sure that we can actually write all the different mentions, mandatory mentions on the packaging. Another important point, changing this type of packaging requires a lot of investment on the production lines, and the fact that we can measure upstream the practicity and the use of the products will reassure us regarding the solutions that we need to choose. So there are industrial challenges, there are challenges for the consumers, while you have an additional challenge for you in the pharmaceutical sector. It's a very specific background for your products. Yes, we're talking about drugs. So it's to do with the health of the consumer. It is extremely regulated today. We need to make sure that we have the proper efficiency, that there is a good security profile. So we are thinking of the formulae, but the packaging is also essential because it has a barrier function. And if we do not have this barrier function, the drugs or the medicine might lose its properties. Here we're talking about an effervescent tablet, so it's very sensitive to the packaging. And these medicines are meant to be left on shelves for several years sometimes. Yes, there are major regulatory challenges. Today you do not have the right to put this medicine on the shelves if you do not have the necessary authorization. So we need to make sure that it keeps the same efficiency. We need to submit the different changes. We are extremely focused on the French market, but our medicines, our drugs are also sold on foreign markets. So we need to submit our products to other, foreign authorities as well. So it is really, really heavy, but it is extremely interesting. So we see that these works, are really heavy for the different companies. But I imagine that if you do it, there is a real benefit for you. So what is the real benefit? The eco-design approach is part of our sustainable policy in our company. So you have the environmental impact that is essential. We also have to talk about the financial aspect. It is a strategic approach for us. Of course, we need to have a short-term investment, but if we look at the medium term, we could amortize part of the cost, especially for the procurement of materials. There's also the reduction of the ADALF contribution. And when we think in terms of macro terms, it's going to be part of an answer to, in terms of environmental adaptation. It shows that the financial performances and the eco-design approach can go in the same direction. So that's what we are working on. This is absolutely essential. If the economic approach does not add up, you cannot do it. What about you, Jean? Well, there are two categories. You have tangible gains and non-tangible gains, and you mentioned that. We talked about the carbon footprint. Beyond that, there are also a lot of challenges in terms of production line profit. Here, you don't need to change the bottling company, for example. You just need to change the label, but you can produce for Europe, for Canada, and for the US. You also have logistical aspects. Most of our clients pay for the shipment. When we told them that the palletization were going to be modified and that they were going to be able to put more bottles in a container, they were happy, actually, satisfied. So we ticked different tangible boxes. When we talk about non-tangible dimensions, we have a CSR approach, and we are contributing to this sustainable dimension. It is part of our mission. And we need to let people know about that. We have a family-oriented company with a patrimonial dimension. We have a new CEO that is extremely motivated on this aspect. And the last aspect is to do with the fact that because this project is going really well, it makes us want to go even further. Thank you very much, Jean-Philippe. I'm turning to you. What are the benefits for you to have got rid of this cardboard box? Beyond the environmental gains regarding the reduction of our packaging on the market, we simplify our operations. It is less items, one item that we do not need to store, so we are more efficient. And these projects are also very motivating for our employees, whether we talk about the employees in the headquarters or in the manufacturing sites. We know that it is something that is for the better. It's also part of the company DNA, and it contributes to our CSR dimension. You were saying that you benefited from the funding for coming from the call for projects. Yes. Usually these investments are really heavy because it affects our production tools, and this call for project is really the little nudge that is really helpful for us. The fact that we have this assistance, this help with the call for project means that we can speed up on other subjects. We showed that that was possible, so we're hoping that we'll be able to generate other initiatives for other projects. So Constance, the project is not as advanced. You are at the very early stage still. But what are the expected benefits with this call for project? Well, in terms of expected benefits, we are hoping to identify the right solution in order to reduce the packaging by 60 tons of plastic. And we would like to be trailblazer in the field of breakfast cereals, because we still use a lot of packaging today, and we would like to come up with the right solutions in order to meet the criteria in terms of plastic reduction, in order to meet the consumer expectations as well, without increasing your environmental impact either. That's what you were saying. Yes, we don't want to have any transfer of impact, because of course plastic has an impact, but there's also the environmental impact beyond that. Thank you very much for this contributions. Next time I go shopping, I'll observe the shelves in the supermarkets to see what you're talking about. So we know that all this is something that is possible, so change is possible. And we hoped that you will motivate other companies to do the same. Okay, so are there any questions before the break? How can we make sure that we can benefit from the funding of CITEO and ADELF? Well, we have campaigns of calls for projects. They are launched regularly, depending on the theme. In 2025, there was a call for project that you contributed to. It was to do with the 5 levers of packaging reduction. 2024, there was the adult call for project regarding the reduction for the bottles. So these are part of these programs. There are also recyclability themes, reuse themes. You just have to look at our news. That's it. Other questions? Should we renounce part of the practicity in the packaging? No. I don't know if you have an answer to that. Have you got rid of some practicity or functionality aspects?
Il serait pas évident de...
Of course, we cannot do without a bottle. But in terms of what's practical in the field of wine, well, your bottle now, you've managed to reduce its weight, and it's just as practical, as convenient as it ever was, right? In this project anyway. Reduced packaging and same level of functionality. Yes, we wanted to keep things as they were, just as convenient. Yes. What about you? You will be changing the packaging, Florence. Right. We want to make sure our products remain as convenient to use. We want to make sure we find a new solution that does not make it less practical. We'd like to make it even better for our consumers. And Philippe, yes, of course, we all do food shopping and see all the packaging that goes to the trash immediately. So for the mayonnaise cardboard case, very few people kept it before they put it in their fridge. So it did not make the product less convenient at all. Mathilde, if anything, right? It did not affect product. Consumers can still open and close the product and it's still protected. We have time for questions online. Did you call on design agencies to help out? Anyone? We have what it takes in-house in terms of designing packaging, so we did not call on any outside companies. Since it's a crucial part of what we do it all in-house. Design agencies in the world of wines and spirits are important for such topics, generally speaking, but same as a colleague here, we have everything we need in-house. And we kept the same bottle, a similar bottle. Of course, a lot of details have changed, but it did not require a design agency, even though that's a usual way to go in such a project. Same here, we have the resources in-house. We have a packaging innovation team, And we also worked with our suppliers as partners. Yes, you relied on your suppliers and co-developed something that met our needs. Same thing, we have packaging engineers in-house who work on the different solutions. And they also work with the solutions suggested by suppliers. A question for Constance. Why can't you have just one box of cereal instead of 6? Yes, we are looking into that. Good point. It needs to be tested. It's a change in use for consumers, but it's on our list. And it's also the solution that we require the most adaptation on the production line, but it is in our study. We did think about it. Great. Thank you. A word of conclusion, if any, or we can keep it at that. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. And now we'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll talk about alternatives to single-use plastic packages with Lola Rodriguez. And then we presented the results on the study on useless packaging. And we just heard from our 4 winners of the CITEO Reduce calls for tender, and they presented their projects around reducing packages, doing away with cardboard cases, reducing in the tablet tube, changing the paper film around cereals, and reducing the weight of glass bottles. And now we're going to present the conclusions on our study for alternatives to single-use plastics. Lola Rodriguez is in charge of, is a project leader in our reduction team. And she's...
Alors Lola, tu as travaillé pendant...
Lola, you worked on this study on alternatives to single-use plastic packages for 1 year. Can you remind us of the context in which you worked? Sure. You all know that the regulatory framework aims to reduce packaging, especially plastic packaging. We have the SUP directive, AGEC law, and PPWR. We're asked to do away with plastic packaging by 2040. Is it possible? In our brief for the household packaging and paper extended producer responsibility, we were asked to conduct a study on this topic and identify alternatives, and check that they make sense for the environment, and identify any breaks, any hurdles to their development, and come up with proposals. So we did that. It wasn't easy, and it's a lot of unique cases. We looked at the CITEO and ADELF plastic waste and identified 48 product pack pairs. And so that's 48% of the feedstock for plastic packaging. And we looked for alternatives using different methods, store checks, bibliography. We talked to materials experts and professional organizations and manufacturers, and we found 800 alternatives that you can break down into 300 main concepts and 3 solutions: single-use solutions, packaging-free solutions and reusable solutions. So say you have a glass bottle with an aluminum or steel cap, that's part of the 800 solutions. And so you can break it down to 300 concepts because that's two similar solutions. Well, it's the same kind of solution, but you're right, there are different caps involved. After that, we conducted 36 environmental analyses using 5 different indicators, climate change and single use. And we came up with 19 pairs for which we have a viable alternative that makes sense for the environment. We also collected information on the technical and financial feasibility of implementing the alternatives. But it's qualitative data, it's not numbers, so it's not easy to show. Yeah, it's specific to every company. We don't have any averages. So it's pretty good news, 48 product package pairs, the different 300 concepts, and the 19 alternatives. So we can do it with plastic, right? It's a challenge. Just identifying a viable plastic-free alternative is not that easy. Yes, in the regulation, you have a definition of what's plastic. We're talking about zero plastic or very little plastic. As soon as there's a little plastic, it's plastic. So we have to pay close attention, including coding. We have to make sure it's not part of the regulatory definition. And then there's things like caps, stoppers, sprays. It's usually plastic in part or in whole. So if you want to get rid of plastic, sometimes you have to get rid with a function like spraying. It's hard to do without plastic. It's impossible at this point. And there's another lesson learned. There's no miracle solution. There's no universal solution. A new material that meets all needs and not plastic doesn't exist yet. And we have to keep in mind that every case has to be reviewed in detail to determine the best alternative that makes the most sense for the environment. But there are alternatives. And there was another lesson learned in terms of single uses. In our simplified LCAs, we found that the best environmental alternatives are those that use cardboard, but only if they meet certain rules. For instance, the alternative needs to be lightweight. It can weigh several times the weight of the plastic packaging it aims to replace, but it shouldn't be more than twice the weight of the plastic packaging, ideally. And if there's plasticization or lamination, especially for intermediate solutions, it has to be as thin as possible. If it's more than 20%, then the alternative is not relevant in our environmental terms. Another thing to keep in mind is whatever the alternative you choose, reduction in weight remains a priority, as well as recyclability, which is a regulatory constraint, regulatory obligation. Right, so in summary, there are cardboard alternatives for single use, because unfortunately, we weren't able to look at the environmental analyses of other materials because we just don't have the data. But for single-use alternatives, we're able to measure those on the market. Cardboard works as long as it's not, it's less than twice as heavy, because so it's 20 grams cardboard for 10 grams plastic. Otherwise, if it's more, then the environmental impact can be actually worse. So keep that in mind. We do want to protect the environment first and foremost. The main message is you have to look at this on a case by case basis. We have done calculations in our current database, but we encourage companies to make sure the alternatives work for them in their specific case. So you have a few examples to show how we conducted this study. Let's talk about an example that we use on a daily basis: pasta and other noodles in plastic bags. In terms of alternatives, we looked into, there are different categories. First of all, you can go packaging free and buy it in bulk by bringing your own container. There are reusable solutions in glass, metal, or plastic, or a mix thereof. And there are also single-use solutions, either more conventional ones already found on the market and more exploratory ones, because they are not found on the market, or they don't meet all different uses, or their TRL is lower. So there are conventional solutions already found on the market, and we're able to found data to do simplified life cycle analyses. And then we decided to take it to the next level using a method we developed with EVA to determine a weight ratio threshold from which an alternative is relevant. How does the method work? We take the simplified LCA results for the two packaging we want to compare. Packaging A we want to replace, and packaging B is potential alternative. We look at the same environmental indicator, and then we adjust the weight of B until it's equivalent in terms of impact with A. For B to have the same impact as A, it should weigh 7.2 grams maximum for 100 grams of product. And to that, we apply an uncertainty margin of 20% and look at where the alternative stands. Here you can see that the cardboard box is lower, well lower, with the blue dot you can see. So this is a relevant alternative in environmental terms, but it's close to the limit. So what we can conclude is that if we want to if we can reduce the weight of the alternative, it'll be even more relevant as a replacement solution. And when you look at a lighter alternative like a paper pack, then it's even more relevant. And we checked. That would be the best alternative, because it can weigh twice as much as the original one and still be relevant. In the end, for the 36 environmental analyses we conducted, we found a viable alternative for 19 pairs. And the different elements you find here with asterisks, since we looked at packages that we find on the market, some contain some plastic, and that was taken into account. And this is how we were able to come to a conclusion in terms of plastic lamination. Around 5 to 15% maximum, looking at real cases. So the asterisks show alternatives that contain plastic, and they're not fully in line with the regulation, but we had to include them in our study because we didn't have ideal solutions. Yes, these are alternatives, even though they're intermediary, not ideal solutions. We're now going to review the 19 product pack pairs. You will find them in every sector, in pasta, rice, drinks, vegetables, hygiene. Let's look at two examples. Let's talk about solid deodorants. Here you have an alternative with 8% plastic. An alternative to the plastic stick is the cardboard stick. This alternative is quite relevant to replace the plastic stick. It could, even if it weighed 5 times more. So this works for solid deodorant. These are stick deodorants. It doesn't work for sprays or liquid deodorants. This is why we talk about a product pack pair. Taking into account the nature and functions of the product. Another example is liquid detergents. We looked at available alternatives to a plastic spray. And so the rare alternative would be a plastic bottle with an aluminum cap. But the alternative falls into the uncertainty zone. So we cannot conclude that it's environmental relevant as a replacement. But we decided to look into whether the weight reduction that would be necessary is feasible, setting the threshold at 30%. If it's below 30%, then we could rework the alternative to make it work. So the necessary reduction is 23%. It's a challenge. It's not easy to achieve, but it's potentially feasible. Yet, you understand that there would be a loss of functionality because we no longer have the spray item. If you compare these two bottles, the alternative is not conclusive. So you have to review on a case-by-case basis the initial package and the solution to see whether it's relevant. Yes. How do you simplify the single use? We really need to reduce single uses. By way of conclusion now, there are alternatives, and some make sense environmentally, but we all know that we cannot implement them overnight. Changing packages and business models are consumer expectations. We may need to wait for future solutions like chromato engineering, and it requires financial investments. So there are challenges, but it's not impossible, especially if we all work together to spread out the workload and the risk. We can work by sector or by theme. We have a reuse approach. For instance, that's an example. As alternative, so we have made headway, and there's still challenges, but we're on the right track. Right? It's complicated. One lesson learned is that when you do cardboard, it changes the pace of production. It's slower to make sometimes, and then it's not easy for liquid products or greasy products. So this is why it requires more R&D, and we support that too, like chromato engineering. but we still have a way to go. And we have our sector working groups working with this to see how we can all work together to find solutions. We believe we can move forward if we all work together. Let me check if we have any questions. Lola, will you make these LCAs public? Will you publish them? Not as such, and we won't publish the full study either, but we do want to share the lessons learned with our customers. So we want to work by sector to make it something that's understandable and usable. Yeah, it's 250 pages for the end deliverable, and then there's all the LCAs conducted with EVEAs. Not that easy to read. And so we are thinking about how we can give the right information in the right format to the right people. We don't want to just send it out to everyone because it will not really be useful or used, which would be a shame. When you see all the information side, we have another question. Will we have access to the list of the 19 product package pairs? Show the slide.
J'imagine qu'on parle.
I imagine that we're talking about so here we have the major industries, the essential products. Maybe Lola, you can mention some of them if you have them in mind. Well, for example, regarding sponges, to replace a promotional package, you have PP bags, and we have actually studied alternatives, either a very big cardboard box for the children products, blister packs that were replaced by blister packs in cardboard, very protective of the products as well, to keep the functionalities. What else do we have? What else about it? It is something. I mean, the peers that we tested, I'm sure will be able to tell you about them. No further questions. So, I mean, I'll just, so no new question. Thank you, Lola. To be continued for the next step in this study. We're going to move on to the last session of this morning, a session on the working groups, the sectorial working groups. Last year, for the first reduction morning in December 2024, we shared with you our desire to assist companies. I think we repeated that several times during this morning. How can we work hand in hand to identify themes, to have collective solutions and implement them? Since last year, we launched sectorial working groups. When we mentioned that back then, it was quite a vague concept. We just said that we had this ambition and we wanted to see how we could work with different companies. The different companies showed some interest, and we hope that it will make you feel like taking part in these working groups. In the light of the first works that we carried out, what can we tell you? What is a sectorial working group? It's a group of industrialists around a given theme in order to identify hindrances, pull different data in order to come up with solutions. Concretely, how do we do? These works usually are on the long term, so there's a first phase to qualify the themes, a phase to identify the themes. So of course, we have ideas about the subject, but it will depend on the levers regarding reduction, you know, the large formats, for example, the switch to large formats. So what type of sectors could these levers apply to? Here we have a preliminary study phase that can last up to 6 months, where we meet companies in order to understand what is at stake, whether or not it could work, and make sure that we are right in the target. So for the working groups we're going to tell you about regarding online sales, it's a very generic theme. So how, by exchanging with companies, how can we fine-tune this theme and identify the main avenues to explore in terms of work? Once we have clarified what is at stake, we try to formalize the project. We define the limits of the project. We try to define a project team, what type of profile, people from the merchandising, from the marketing. And now we have started the recruitment phase. We're going to get in touch with different companies in order for them to take part and continue with the project. So it's going to last for about a month. It will depend on the project. And once this is done, we're going to launch the working group concretely. So the modalities are going to be very customized. It's going to depend on the working group, on the number of people in the group. We can also, you know, have different modes. We're going to meet on a regular basis. We'll have maybe additional studies to carry out, focus groups, test consumers, test in different stores. Everything will be imagined for the different formats we want to set up. Anyway, today we have 2 working groups that were launched in 25. We want to launch 6 of them in 26. So far, we have 2 working groups. A first one on the removal and the end of special pack promotional offers for the reduction of the plastic packaging. We have about 20, 30 companies that want to take part in this working group. And another working group which is going to look at the reduction of empty spaces in the online sales. Hugo Jublon was in charge of TSR within FIVATE, and Gael Alves, in charge of the market for CITEO, had come to tell us about their works on the reduction of empty space. We're also going to have Stéphanie Morisset, who is in charge of Colissimo within the group La Poste. Well, all these people are here today to tell us about these working groups regarding the reduction of empty space in online sales. Well, good morning, Hugo. Good morning to you all. For those of you who are not here in September, can you remind us of the context for this working group and the commitments of the signatories? Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, maybe I'd like to thank CITEO's teams for the organization of this event on this absolutely essential theme, and for taking the initiative of this working group with the Federation of E-Commerce and Online Sales. We are representing the e-retailers in France. We have 900 companies that are members of our association. We want to promote a more sustainable e-commerce. We have a CSR commission and this working group on the reduction of empty space. Well, we took actions at the beginning of September. We wanted to announce this working group. Why such a working group? Well, maybe we need to say that, as you said, Geraldine, it's part of the responsible e-commerce charter that was signed by our minister in charge of ecological transition. And in this charter, there's a well-known commitment, the number 7, which wants to have actions to reduce the packaging and the empty space rate by about 40%. So we are looking at the delivery, packaging. We want to reduce the empty space rate as much as possible. We are trying to promote packaging that are in proportion to the size of the product. We're also looking at the sizing and the optimization of the ecosystems, raise awareness among the third parties. The e-commerce, the e-retail is really dependent on logistics and the other way around. We have collaborative approach within the FIVAD with CITEO and this working group. Regarding the form of our exchanges, well, we wanted to adopt a flexible approach in order to really set up collective dynamics. The idea, well, I mean, we had observed that there was a lot of things at stake regarding reduction. And we wanted everybody to be around the table, the whole industry. And this is how we came up with the idea of a working group. We want to have all the players of e-commerce around the table in order to start reflecting upon this theme, which is a strong expectation in the industry. This morning, we also want to say that this working group aims at anticipating the regulation. We know that there are very strong regulatory expectations in France and in the European Union. We have the PPWR regulation in the EU with a reduction of 50% of the empty space rates. We want to limit it to 40%. So the objective of this working group is to anticipate the European regulation. I believe that the works that will come from this approach, which is very innovative, well, I think these works might be able to inspire the public authorities in France or in Europe. So we are ahead of these regulations by launching this working group. Yeah, there is a lot of things at stake regarding the regulatory impact. Could you tell us more about this working group? Who is taking part? As Hugo said, well, people seem to be very interested in the working group. We have 10 members, companies from the e-commerce sector, upstream and downstream, because we have packaging suppliers, logistical companies, e-retailers. We also want to anticipate over the delivery mode. So you see the different members of the working group on the screen, and I'd like to thank them because they are very committed with FIVAD and CTO in this working group. There's a real representativity, and therefore we'll have a very collective action that will be very relevant in relation to this sector. Now, the different themes in terms of work, reducing the empty space, having packaging that are adjusted to the product. Could you tell us more about all this? Yes. we have identified these different avenues to explore. So we want to expose that and to observe that in the working group. So first of all, trying to reduce the packaging, specifically when the primary packaging is enough for the confidentiality and the protection of the products, and therefore, you know, putting an end to the shipment packaging will be a real environmental gains. Often when we talk about this, people do not really understand. When I order a product, rather than receiving in additional packaging, I just receive it as it would be if I had bought it in a store. Yes, a few players are already doing that. We have some categories. I receive the product in the primary packaging with just a delivery labeling. I do not have an additional packaging. The idea is to say that maybe these isolated cases were made possible, and maybe it is possible to generalize this practice. Then we need to imagine a reduced size for the standard packaging. We know that in some cases, the beauty, the cosmetic products, we can have more product orders, and if we have just one lipstick or, a very small product, well, we can see that the packaging that we have today are far too big for very small products, and therefore we're not going to reach our 50% reduction target in that case. Okay, let us look at what has been achieved within this working group. The first lessons that we learned, well, they come from the first exchanges that we had. We had interviews, we went also to the field, and we were able to identify hindrances for the consumers and for the logistics. The consumer hindrances, first of all, the difficulty of having an absolute reduction. That is to say that the weight that is gained is not transferred to the UVC. The fact that if the primary packaging is not robust enough, I strengthen it, but maybe sometimes it's too significant, and therefore you are losing the potential gains in terms of weight. So it would be an additional loss because you do not have any specific product or product that are only for the e-commerce. You also have constraints that are related to the product identifications to, for example, avoid theft or to guarantee the anonymity of products. Over Christmas time, for example, you don't want your kids to know what you have bought them for Christmas. You also have sanitary challenges. Some product categories, such as lingerie products, for them you cannot only have the primary packaging. There were also logistical hindrances. For example, the management of grouped orders. For that means, when as a consumer you order something and your different products grouped in one packaging with different types of products in the packaging. So there's an additional complexity. How do I manage the heterogeneity of the products with different types of shapes? So how within just one packaging do I optimize the space in order to reduce the empty space? And last, the case of fragile products. We know that we need to have additional packaging without being detrimental to the integrity of the products. In the light of the PPWR regulation, everything that is to do with the stabilization of the products with the packaging, all this, like the bubble paper, for example, it is considered, is it thought, or taken into account as an empty space. So sometimes these are completely necessary for stabilizing the product, if they are fragile products, for example. So we are keeping on with our approach. We are making headways, and we already have very tangible cases that we'll be able to show you later on. We have here the representative of Colissimo for La Poste. So concretely for you, what is the interest of taking part in this approach? Well, good morning, everybody. Within Colissimo, over the last 20 years, we've been committed to this approach to reduce our environmental footprint. When we distribute 490 million parcels per year, of course, we have a major impact if we reduce our own impact, but also by working with the whole ecosystem to work on the reduction of our own impact. So it's a major challenge for us to work with our e-retailers clients, but also with all the players of the value chain to develop an e-commerce that is more responsible. And this is why we signed the e-commerce charter, because we want to provide solutions.
Quelques éléments
to set the context and help you understand our approach and why we joined the working group. Well, we've already reduced our CO2 emissions. By improving deliveries, we've reduced our CO2 emissions per package by 53% between 2013 and 2024. The first thing we did was to rework to reduce the kilometers traveled. We improved our supply chain with hubs. We worked on low carbon fuel alternatives, whether for a medium to a long travels by truck, and that's 12% of the kilometers traveled is in low carbon energy. And then we have electric vehicles, and in the cities we have 1,000 cargo bicycles. And lastly, we use orderly bulk to fit as many packages as possible into our trucks by leaving no empty space around the packages. You can see this on the left. Right? It's like a puzzle, a Tetris. And we really use every space. We remove any useless crates. And together with our mobile solutions, we have optimized our transportation needs by 30%. To take it to the next level, we really need now to work with our e-retailers. Now that we have done everything to use all the space in our trucks, now we want to help our customers do the same and do it with any empty space in the packages. This is why it's important for us to be part of this working group. And by the way, reducing empty space will have other positive consequences. When you reduce empty space, you reduce the risk of crushing packages in shipping, because right now it's multiplied by 3 when there's too much empty space in a package and around the packages. I mean, sorry, because they move around in the truck. You can see that it looks more stable this way. It's like building a wall with bricks. The package at the bottom may be crushed if you have too much empty space above. And reducing the empty space also reduces the size of the package that can fit directly into the mailbox more often. So if you're not home, then it means the mailman doesn't have to go again and try and deliver the package. That's another advantage. And when you reduce the empty space, you reduce the size of the packaging around the product shipped. And this means you reduce the carbon footprint and as well as the raw materials footprint. By way of indication, we analyzed the life cycle to understand the environmental impact throughout the life cycle of a package delivered by Colissimo. And the study showed that the carbon footprint of the package, including also its end of life, was equivalent to or even higher than the carbon footprint of its delivery. So it's significant, it's not negligible. So to keep working on reducing packaging collectively, next slide. It's important for us to be part of the working group and to come up with proposals, suggestions, to make sure that the solutions that we come up with are well suited for our industrial needs and tools. Here you can see pictures of our package sorting platforms. We have to make sure that the packages can get around these sorting lines. We have to be able to read the tags and keep them flowing on our sorting lines. This way we can plan ahead if we need to change the way we work, the tools we use. We can anticipate and plan ahead with a working group. This is also why we asked CITEO to come and see one of our sorting platforms to understand what the packages go through and the constraints involved. And in closing, this is important for us in this working group. We understand what is at stake. We understand every stakeholder's constraints in this package supply chain. And this way we can make sure that it works for all of us end to end, and we keep up the quality of service and have a positive impact for the environment. Exactly. In the working group, we talk, we share. It's bilateral. It's not theoretical. It's operational. And we go on the ground, and we want to thank La Poste for letting us visit their platform in Le Thier, and also other players in the working group are inviting us to see their tools. And we'll have also design thinking sessions so we can find the best solutions for the field needs for everyone. So, great. We have quite a few questions for you. One for you, go first. Why do you want to go beyond the objectives set in the PPWR, including the empty space ratio? Well, there's an environmental emergency we face. It's pressing. We want to do the best we can. In terms of reducing empty space, companies are doing their share. There are individual things being done, and the purpose of this working group is to agree on a shared method to meet needs and expectations. If we can do more, if we can do better, great. It's better for the planet and everyone. The lawmaker set an objective. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do better if we can. So an ambitious working group, yes. And we see it in our first meetings and our first field visits. We really want to work in depth on these topics. We want to understand the specificities of e-commerce. Every retailer has his own business model. We want to understand the differences and find a common ground and find a reliable method that is easy to deploy for the entire sector. My dream is that all e-retailers can follow what we do in this working group. Great. And about the first point, sending packages without any extra packaging, do you have concrete examples? People have a hard time visualizing what it is we mean. For example, I know I have received a soft, foam-like package that you can use for things that don't break. You can just send out in their primary packaging. Any other examples? Well, non-food household products that are already well packaged in a protective packaging and can be sent as such. WEEE products quite often, and games and toys. There are different things that can be sent in their primary packaging. And so we want to learn from that and work with the manufacturers and logistics companies, because we can apply this to other categories. We can find solutions for other categories. Yes, we're trying to identify as many products like that. Stephanie, what is the minimum size of an e-commerce package? Well, you can send all sorts. You can send an envelope. There's no minimum size, really. If it's a very small product, you can fit it into a letter envelope, yes. There are limits on the size of the tag. Yes, of course. This is why we conduct these tests for our sorting machines. We have to be able to put these packages through our sorting machines, even though we have solutions for extra large packages and very small packages. But we do have to keep this in mind. This is why I mentioned an envelope, because it's large enough to provide all the information we need. It's not so much the packaging. It can always be custom made, but you need to streamline processes, the sizes of packages, to have no more than 20 SKUs, for instance. And make sure products are sold in similar packages. Yes, there's a size, but there's also the weight. You can have a small package if it's heavy enough that won't fly off the line. You saw we have mechanized processes that go fast. If it's too light and too small, then it can just fall off the sorting line. If it's small and heavy, it can work. So we take different constraints into account. It's not just size. There are other criteria that come into play as well. Last question. When and how will results be published? The results from your online sales working group, mail order working group? Well, so far, we kicked off on September 30th. So we've just started working together as a working group. We have achieved a few things already. CITEO experts are conducting bilateral interviews with the working group participants, and there are field visits. And we set a date for the next steering group meetings. For the date of the results, I don't know if Gael knows. I don't know if we've set a date. 2026. Oh, for sure. We're trying to go as fast as possible. Yes, of course, we have a schedule. We have a timeline. And we'd like to be able to show results by the end of next year. First phase is exploratory. We identify things in depth, and then we want to move to an experimentation stage in the middle of next year. And then you never know, we might run into new constraints. We'll have to be agile and adapt. But so far, we're on track. It's going well. We're on time. And we hope to share initial deliverables of the knowledge acquired in the middle of the year and then test solutions. And we'll call on companies to help us test solutions. So it will depend on who wants to get involved and when it can be done for different products. But we're really aiming for the end of next year. We will see. Time will tell. So initial results middle of next year and more a year from now. Perhaps you'll come back and tell us more at a future Reduce Day. Wonderful. Thank you to the three of you, and we look forward to receiving our products in smaller packages. To keep going on the sectoral working groups, last year we suggested sharing with us your topics, and we encourage you to join working groups. Well, here again, please let us know your name and your company in the chat, or scan this QR code that will take you to the CITEO Reduce homepage, or page where you can sign up to a working group or express an interest in joining a working group at least. We're discussing doing away with cardboard packages in hygiene products and extra cardboard in food products. So we have a lot of things we're working on. So let us know, and we'll see how we can work together. We're always interested in finding participants. So that was the last sequence in this Reduce morning, ahead of schedule. If you're interested in these topics, please follow us on the social media, or by signing up for our newsletter. You can sign up to our future events and for for continuous improvement to let us know what we did well or not so well and what we can improve. You can scan this QR code. And now I want to thank everyone at CITEO and everyone who agreed to join us today, the communications and events and marketing team that helped us prepare this event. I want to thank the moderators who manage your questions online. I want to thank the eco design team. Thank you all. See you soon. Actually, next year for our next Reduce Day. Thank you.